Cruelty often hides behind routine. It wears the mask of authority, speaks in familiar commands, and convinces everyone watching that nothing can ever change. On one such day, in a place where fear had become normal, an elderly enslaved woman was singled out, her weakness mocked, her dignity stripped away in front of silent witnesses. The man responsible believed this moment would pass like all the others, forgotten as soon as it ended. But this time something was different. Just as humiliation reached its breaking point, the air shifted. Silence fell where shouting once ruled. And from the edge of what people thought they understood about power, justice, and reality itself, an impossible presence emerged, one that answered to no human authority. What happened next would leave witnesses questioning not only who truly held power, but whether the world itself had risen to defend the helpless. This is a story about cruelty pushed too far, quiet strength that refused to break, and a moment so unbelievable that it shattered the illusion that injustice always wins. The story opens on a day that feels ordinary to those in control, but heavy and frightening for those who are not. The workyard is alive with noise, orders shouted, tools clanging, footsteps moving in hurried fear. At the center of this place stands the foreman, a man who believes authority gives him the right to dominate not only bodies, but dignity itself. His power is not earned through wisdom or fairness. It is enforced through fear. Among the workers is an elderly enslaved woman. Age has bent her back, slowed her steps, and weakened her hands, but it has not broken her spirit. She has lived through years of hardship, loss, and silent endurance. Her face carries the history of pain, but also the quiet strength of survival. She works as best she can, even when her body no longer obeys her will. The foreman notices her struggle, not with compassion, but with irritation. To him, weakness is an insult. Instead of offering rest or understanding, he chooses cruelty. He calls attention to her in front of everyone. His words are sharp and humiliating, meant to wound deeper than any physical blow. He mocks her age, her slowness, and her inability to meet his impossible demands. This public humiliation is deliberate. The foreman wants witnesses. He wants others to see what happens when someone fails to meet his expectations. By targeting the weakest person, he sends a message. If I can do this to her, I can do it to anyone. The elderly woman becomes a symbol in that moment, not just of suffering, but of how power is abused when unchecked. She stands there as insults rain down, surrounded by people who are too afraid to intervene. Some lower their eyes in shame. Others feel anger rise in their chests, but know that resistance could bring even harsher punishment. Her emotions are complex and deeply human. There is pain, of course, pain from being stripped of dignity in front of others. There is fear, because humiliation often comes before harsher treatment. But there is also something quieter and stronger, endurance. She does not shout back. She does not collapse. Her silence is not weakness. It is survival. This moment reveals the true nature of the foreman. His cruelty does not come from strength, but from insecurity. People who rely on humiliation to maintain control fear losing power. By demeaning others, he tries to elevate himself. Yet, in doing so, he exposes his moral emptiness. The emotional impact of the scene is heavy. The audience feels anger at the injustice, sorrow for the woman, and frustration at the silence of the crowd. This discomfort is intentional. The story forces us to confront an ugly truth. Systems of oppression survive not only because of cruel leaders, but also because fear keeps others quiet. At the heart of this keynote is a powerful lesson about vulnerability. The elderly woman represents those who are often overlooked, people whose voices are ignored because they are old, weak, poor, or powerless. When authority targets such individuals, it reveals how deeply broken that authority is. Another lesson is about dignity. Even when everything is taken away, freedom, safety, respect, dignity can still exist internally. The woman's refusal to beg or lash out preserves her humanity in a situation designed to erase it. Her quiet strength contrasts sharply with the foreman's loud cruelty. This keynote also teaches us that public humiliation is a tool of control. It is meant to isolate the victim and warn others. But it often has the opposite effect. It exposes injustice so clearly that it plants the seeds of resistance, even if that resistance comes later. Most importantly, the story reminds us that power without compassion is dangerous. Authority should protect the vulnerable, not exploit them. When power is used to harm those who cannot fight back, it becomes a moral failure, not a position of leadership. In the silence that follows the humiliation, something changes. Though no one speaks, the atmosphere is no longer the same. The foreman believes he has proven his dominance, but in reality he has revealed his cruelty to everyone watching. The woman, though humiliated, has unknowingly exposed the weakness of the system that tries to crush her. This moment becomes the emotional foundation of the entire story. It prepares the audience for what comes next by clearly defining who holds power, how that power is abused, and why justice, no matter how unexpected, feels necessary. The keynote leaves us with a lasting message. How we treat the weakest among us reveals who we truly are. Cruelty may command fear for a moment, but it never earns respect. And even in the darkest displays of oppression, quiet dignity can shine as a form of resistance. After the foreman's harsh words echo through the workyard, silence follows, but it is not empty. It is heavy, tense, and full of unspoken fear. All eyes turn toward the elderly enslaved woman, waiting to see what she will do. Some expect her to collapse under the weight of humiliation. Others fear she might protest and face even worse consequences. But what happens instead is something far more powerful. She remains standing. Her body trembles slightly, not from weakness alone, but from the effort it takes to remain composed. Years of hardship have taught her that survival is not always about resistance in loud forms. Sometimes survival means endurance. Sometimes strength is choosing not to give your oppressor the satisfaction of seeing you break. The woman does not shout back. She does not plead for mercy. She does not lower herself to match the cruelty thrown at her. Instead, she lifts her head just enough to show that, though her body may be controlled, her spirit is not owned. This quiet response confuses the foreman. He expected fear. He expected tears. He expected submission so complete that it would reinforce his sense of dominance. But her silence unsettles him. It denies him emotional victory. In a place where loudness is used as a weapon, her calm becomes a form of defiance. Inside her, a storm of emotions rages. There is pain, deep, cutting pain from being shamed before others. There is sorrow because she knows this humiliation is not just about her, but about what she represents: age, vulnerability, and disposability in the eyes of those in power. There is fear, too, because she has seen how easily cruelty can escalate. Yet alongside these emotions is something stronger, resolve. She has lived long enough to understand that injustice thrives on reaction. It feeds on visible despair. By refusing to give that reaction, she protects what little control she still has, control over her dignity. Her quiet strength is not passive, it is intentional. The people watching her feel it. Some are struck with shame for not defending her. Others feel a sudden, sharp respect. In her silence they see themselves, their own fear, their own endurance, their own swallowed pain. She becomes a mirror reflecting the cost of survival in an unjust system. This moment transforms her from a victim into a symbol. She symbolizes resilience, not the kind that conquers through force, but the kind that survives through patience and inner strength. Her endurance sends a message without words: you may humiliate me, but you will not define me. The foreman, sensing the shift in energy, grows angrier. His authority relies on visible submission, and her calm denies him that. He may control the space, but he cannot control how she carries herself within it. This realization frustrates him more than any argument could have. For the woman, this endurance has been learned over decades. Every loss, every injustice, every quiet night of grief has shaped her ability to withstand pain without surrendering her identity. Her strength is not sudden or dramatic. It is the result of a lifetime spent surviving what should never have been endured. Her quiet resilience also carries an important emotional truth. Not all heroes shout. Some endure. Some survive long enough to become living proof that injustice does not always succeed in crushing the human spirit. The lesson here is profound and universal. True strength is not always visible. Society often celebrates loud resistance and dramatic victories, but this story reminds us that resilience can exist in stillness. Enduring injustice without losing one's humanity is a form of courage that often goes unrecognized, yet it is essential. Another lesson is about dignity. Even when stripped of power, status, and safety, a person can still choose how they respond. That choice, however small it may seem, can protect the soul from being completely overtaken by cruelty. The woman's endurance also challenges the audience to reconsider how they judge strength. Weakness is often assigned to the elderly, the poor, and the oppressed. But in this moment, the strongest person in the yard is not the man shouting orders. It is the woman who absorbs humiliation without letting it destroy her. Emotionally, the scene leaves a lasting impact. The audience feels sorrow for her suffering, anger at the injustice, and admiration for her resilience. Her quiet strength plants a seed of discomfort in everyone watching, including the foreman, because it exposes a truth. Power that relies on humiliation is fragile. This keynote also prepares the ground for what follows in the story. Her endurance creates moral tension. The injustice feels unresolved. The audience senses that such cruelty cannot be the final word. Her resilience demands balance, justice, reckoning, or intervention. In the end, the woman walks away from the moment changed but not broken. The humiliation remains a wound, but it does not define her worth. She carries herself with the same quiet determination she has always known, proving that resilience does not erase pain, it survives alongside it. Her strength becomes a reminder to the audience. Even when the world is unjust, the human spirit can remain unowned. Silence can be strength. Endurance can be resistance, and dignity, once chosen, cannot be taken by force. This keynote stands as the emotional heart of the story, a testament to the power of quiet resilience in the face of cruelty, and a reminder that injustice may wound the body, but it does not have to conquer the soul. Cruelty has a rhythm. It often builds slowly, through words, gestures, and silence, until it reaches a moment where it feels unbearable. In the story, that moment arrives just after the elderly woman has endured public humiliation. The foreman, emboldened by the quiet fear around him, prepares to push his authority even further. His voice grows harsher. His posture grows more confident. He believes nothing can stop him. This is the moment when injustice feels complete. The air in the workyard becomes tense, as if even nature itself is holding its breath. The workers sense that something worse is coming. Some turn their faces away, unable to watch. Others stand frozen, trapped between fear and guilt. The elderly woman remains still, her quiet strength intact, but the weight of cruelty hangs heavily around her, and then everything changes. At first it is a sound, low, deep, not human. It cuts through the noise of the yard like a warning. Conversations stop, orders fall silent, people look around, confused and unsettled. The sound comes again, closer this time. It carries authority, not chaos. It is not the sound of panic. It is the sound of command. From the edge of the land, an alpha wolf appears. No one understands it at first. Wolves are creatures of distance, of forests and shadows, not places ruled by men and cruelty. Its presence feels impossible, like a mistake in reality itself. The animal steps forward calmly, its movements controlled and deliberate. There is no rush, no wild aggression, only confidence. The foreman freezes. For the first time in the story, fear appears on his face. This is not fear created by rebellion or defiance from people he believes he owns. This is fear born from something he cannot command, threaten, or humiliate. The wolf does not recognize titles or power structures. It does not respond to shouting or authority. It answers only to instinct and balance. The emotional shift is immediate and overwhelming. Where moments ago the elderly woman stood alone under humiliation, now all eyes are on the wolf. The crowd feels a strange mix of terror and awe. Some step backward, others stare, unsure whether to run or remain still. The foreman's voice, once so loud, fails him. His power dissolves in silence. The wolf's presence feels symbolic, even sacred. It stands between cruelty and its victim, not attacking, not retreating, simply being. Its steady gaze seems to say what no one else could say out loud: this is wrong. For the woman, the moment is surreal. She does not cheer. She does not move toward the animal. She barely moves at all. But inside her, something shifts. For the first time, the injustice she has endured feels witnessed, not just by people, but by the world itself. The force that appears is not human, and that is precisely why it is so powerful. The alpha wolf represents something ancient and uncontrollable, natural justice. Throughout the story, human systems have failed her. Authority has been cruel. Rules have protected the powerful. Fear has silenced witnesses. But nature does not operate on those rules. The wolf's presence feels like a reminder that cruelty is not invisible, and injustice does not go unnoticed forever. The foreman tries to assert control. He shouts, he gestures, but his commands mean nothing now. The wolf does not flinch. It does not need to. Its power is quiet, just like the woman's endurance. But unlike hers, it is undeniable. The roles reverse in a way no one could have imagined. This moment teaches a crucial lesson. True power does not always announce itself. The foreman's power relied on performance, on shouting, humiliating, and being seen as dominant. The wolf's power requires none of that. It simply exists, and in existing, it restores balance. The contrast exposes how fragile the foreman's authority truly was. Emotionally, the scene leaves the audience breathless. Fear blends with relief. Tension gives way to awe. The cruelty that felt unstoppable moments earlier suddenly feels small and temporary. The story does not need violence to make its point. The presence alone is enough to disrupt everything. Another important lesson emerges here. Help does not always come from expected places. The workers expected no rescue. The woman expected no mercy. The system had proven itself broken. Yet intervention arrives in a form no one could predict. This reminds the audience that hope does not always follow logic, and justice does not always arrive through familiar paths. The alpha wolf also reflects the woman's inner strength. Both are quiet, both are steady. Both refuse to be intimidated. In this way, the wolf feels less like a coincidence and more like a mirror, an external expression of the resilience she has carried inside all along. The witnesses will never forget this moment. Even if they cannot explain it, even if they are told later that it never happened or that they imagined it, the feeling remains. Something stepped in when cruelty went too far. Something reminded them that unchecked power is not absolute. For the audience, the message is clear and deeply emotional. When injustice reaches its peak, the world has ways of responding that go beyond human control. This keynote marks the turning point of the story. It breaks the illusion that cruelty is unstoppable. It challenges the belief that the vulnerable are always alone, and it introduces the idea that justice, whether symbolic, natural, or moral, has a presence that cannot be silenced forever. The alpha wolf does not need to speak. Its presence is the statement, and in that moment the balance of power shifts, not through violence, but through undeniable truth. Cruelty pauses, fear changes sides, and for the first time, those who believed themselves untouchable realize they are not. Power often looks strongest just before it breaks. In the story, the foreman has spent years believing himself untouchable. His authority has always worked the same way through loud commands, public humiliation, and the certainty that no one would challenge him. Fear has been his greatest tool. As long as others were afraid, he believed control was permanent. But the moment the alpha wolf appears, that illusion begins to crack. At first, the foreman tries to maintain his posture. His shoulders remain squared. His face hardens, as if anger alone might drive the threat away. He tells himself that this, too, can be controlled. After all, everything else always has been. Yet something feels different. The fear rising inside him does not respond to logic or authority. It is raw, instinctive, and impossible to silence. This is the beginning of his collapse. The crowd senses it immediately. Those who once flinched at his voice now watch him closely. They notice the hesitation in his movements, the pause before his next command, the uncertainty in his eyes. The man who ruled through confidence now struggles to hold it together. His power, once loud and dominating, begins to feel fragile. Fear spreads, not just among the workers, but outward from the foreman himself. His fear is different from theirs. The workers have always feared punishment, humiliation, and loss. The foreman fears something far worse, the loss of control. For someone who defines himself by dominance, this is terrifying. Without control, he has nothing to stand on. He raises his voice, attempting to restore order, but the sound comes out strained, no longer sharp with authority. The words that once silenced everyone now echo uselessly. No one moves the way they used to. Some step back. Others stand frozen, eyes shifting between the wolf and the man who no longer seems so powerful. Chaos does not arrive as noise or violence. It arrives as confusion. Orders go unanswered. The rigid structure of the yard dissolves. The routines that once kept everything in line suddenly mean nothing. Fear has changed sides. The workers are still afraid, but now they are not alone in it. The foreman is afraid too, and that shared fear destroys the hierarchy that once defined the space. Emotionally, this shift is intense. For the foreman, panic begins to replace anger. He realizes that threats no longer work. There is no punishment harsh enough to scare away a force that does not understand punishment. His usual weapons, humiliation, shouting, intimidation, are useless. The wolf does not react. The crowd does not respond as before. Control slips through his fingers. For the workers, the moment is shocking. Some feel relief, some feel disbelief. Others feel a cautious sense of hope they have not allowed themselves to feel in years. Watching the oppressor falter creates a powerful emotional release. It confirms something they have always suspected but never dared to believe. His power was never absolute. The elderly woman, who stood at the center of the earlier humiliation, becomes the quiet witness to this reversal. She does not celebrate, she does not move, but she sees it clearly. The man who tried to break her dignity now struggles to hold his own together. The fear meant for her has returned to its source. This moment carries a deep symbolic meaning. The collapse of the foreman's confidence shows that authority built on cruelty is unstable. It depends entirely on the compliance of others. Once fear shifts, even slightly, that authority begins to crumble. The story reminds us that oppression survives only as long as people believe it is unbeatable. The chaos that follows is not wild or reckless. It is moral chaos. The rules that once governed behavior no longer make sense. People question their roles. They question the foreman's right to command. Silence replaces obedience, and in that silence, his dominance fades. One important lesson emerges clearly. Fear is a double-edged weapon. The foreman used fear to control others, but he never learned how to live with fear himself. When he finally feels it, he has no strength to face it. In contrast, the workers, and especially the elderly woman, have lived with fear for years. They know how to endure it. That difference matters. Another lesson is about confidence versus true strength. The foreman's confidence was loud and aggressive, but it was shallow. It depended on constant reinforcement through cruelty. Once challenged, it collapsed quickly. True strength, the story suggests, is quieter. It does not require humiliation or control. It endures pressure without falling apart. As chaos spreads, the foreman becomes smaller in the eyes of everyone watching. He is no longer a symbol of power, but of instability. His authority dissolves not because someone attacks him, but because the belief in his dominance disappears. This shift changes everything. The yard, once ruled by fear, becomes a place of uncertainty. But uncertainty, unlike fear, contains possibility. The workers begin to imagine a world where cruelty is not inevitable. Even if nothing changes immediately, the mental barrier has been broken. They have seen the oppressor afraid, and that knowledge cannot be taken back. The emotional impact on the audience is strong. There is tension, satisfaction, and a sense of justice unfolding, not through revenge, but through exposure. The Foreman is revealed for what he truly is, a man whose power existed only as long as others believed in it. This keynote also teaches that chaos is not always destructive. Sometimes, chaos is necessary to break systems built on harm. Order that protects cruelty is not worth preserving. When that order collapses, it creates space for truth to emerge. By the end of this moment, the balance of power has shifted completely. The Foreman may still stand in the yard, but he no longer commands it. Fear has undone what fear once created. The story leaves us with a lasting message. Control maintained through cruelty will always fail when confronted by something it cannot dominate. Confidence rooted in oppression is an illusion, and when that illusion breaks, even the loudest tyrant is left standing in silence. This keynote marks the emotional turning point where injustice begins to unravel, not through force, but through the collapse of false authority. It reminds us that fear, once turned back on the oppressor, becomes the beginning of their end. The workyard, once filled with shouting, commands, and fear, falls into an uneasy silence. The Foreman no longer dominates the space. The alpha wolf stands calm and unmoving. The elderly woman remains where she is, quiet and dignified. And around them all, the witnesses struggle to understand what they have just seen. This moment is not loud or dramatic. It is heavy with disbelief. People exchange uncertain glances, as if silently asking one another the same question. Did that really happen? Some rub their eyes, others hold their breath. The event does not fit into the rules they have lived by for so long. In their world, power has always been clear, cruelty unquestioned, and injustice expected. What they have just witnessed challenges everything they believe to be fixed and unchangeable. The shock runs deep. For many of the witnesses, this is the first time they have seen the powerful interrupted without consequence. No rebellion, no punishment, no immediate retaliation. Just a sudden, undeniable shift. The idea that something outside human authority could intervene feels unsettling and strangely comforting at the same time. Emotion floods the space in waves. There is awe, because what they saw seems impossible. There is fear, because if the rules of their world can break, then nothing feels certain anymore. There is relief, because for once, cruelty did not win. And there is confusion, because justice arrived in a form no one could explain. The elderly woman becomes the quiet center of this emotional storm. Though she says nothing, many eyes drift back to her. Some feel shame for having watched her humiliation in silence. Others feel gratitude, even if they cannot put it into words. She did not call for help. She did not fight back. Yet somehow, she was not alone in the end. This is where the story moves beyond a single moment and becomes something larger. The witnesses begin to question not just what happened, but what it means. Was it coincidence? Was it chance? Or was it something deeper? Something like justice responding when human systems failed. For people who have lived under constant oppression, the idea of justice has always felt distant and abstract. It belonged to stories, not real life. Yet here it is standing quietly in the yard, having changed everything without a single word. Nature itself seems to have taken a side. This idea unsettles the witnesses the most. They have been taught that power flows in one direction, from those in control to those beneath them, but nature does not follow those rules. The wolf did not respond to status, titles, or threats. It did not recognize the foreman's authority. It responded only to balance. This realization plants a powerful thought in their minds. If nature does not agree with cruelty, then perhaps cruelty is not as normal or inevitable as they were taught to believe. The witnesses also struggle with guilt. They replay the moment of humiliation in their minds. They remember their silence, their fear, their unwillingness to act. Now, having seen intervention arrive from an unexpected place, they are forced to confront their own inaction. The wolf did what they could not, or would not, do. This reflection is painful but necessary. It teaches one of the story's most important lessons. Witnessing injustice carries responsibility. Silence may protect the individual in the moment, but it allows cruelty to grow. The witnesses now understand that doing nothing does not mean nothing happened. It means injustice was allowed to continue. Another lesson emerges just as clearly. Justice does not always arrive in familiar forms. People expect justice to come through rules, leaders, or systems. But in this story, all of those failed. The system protected the oppressor. Authority enabled cruelty. Fear silenced resistance. Justice arrived only when something outside that system stepped in. This forces the audience and the witnesses to reconsider where hope comes from. Sometimes hope appears not as a plan, but as a moment, not as a command, but as a presence, not as violence, but as undeniable truth. The alpha wolf, whether seen as real, symbolic, or something in between, becomes a shared memory that cannot be erased, even if the foreman later tries to dismiss it, even if others try to explain it away. The feeling remains. Something answered injustice when nothing else did. The emotional impact of this realization is lasting. Some witnesses feel inspired. If cruelty can be challenged, even once, then perhaps it is not permanent. Others feel unsettled. If the world is capable of such intervention, then their old beliefs about power no longer feel safe. Change becomes possible, and possibility can be frightening. For the elderly woman, the moment does not erase her suffering. It does not undo years of pain, but it does something just as important. It affirms her humanity. She was seen. She was not abandoned. Her quiet strength mattered. The audience is left with deep questions. Is justice always human, made, or does the world itself resist cruelty in ways we do not understand? When people fail to protect the vulnerable, does something else step in to restore balance? And if so, what does that say about our responsibility to act before injustice reaches that point? The final lesson of this keynote is powerful and universal. Injustice may appear strong, but it is never invisible. Even when systems ignore suffering, even when witnesses remain silent, cruelty leaves a mark. And sometimes, through nature, chance, or moral awakening, the world responds. The witnesses will never see power the same way again. They have learned that authority can falter, that silence can be challenged, and that the helpless are not always alone, even when it feels that way. The story closes not with answers, but with awareness. Awareness that justice can arrive unexpectedly, awareness that cruelty is not absolute, and awareness that even in the darkest moments, something, whether nature, conscience, or truth, can rise to defend the helpless. That understanding stays with the witnesses long after the moment passes, and it stays with the audience too, reminding us that the world is watching, even when it seems silent, and that injustice, no matter how powerful it appears, is never beyond being questioned. The foreman's cruelty, once unquestioned, was exposed for what it truly was: fragile, hollow, and dependent on silence. His confidence collapsed the moment he faced something he could not command or humiliate. The elderly woman, who had endured shame with quiet dignity, never raised her voice or struck back, yet her resilience became the moral center of the story. She proved that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it stands still and refuses to be broken. The appearance of the alpha wolf marked the turning point, an interruption so unexpected that it shattered the belief that injustice is inevitable. Whether seen as nature, fate, or symbolic justice, its presence reminded everyone watching that cruelty does not exist unnoticed. When human systems failed, something beyond them answered. Control turned into chaos, fear changed sides, and the illusion of absolute power was destroyed without a single act of violence. The witnesses were left forever changed. They questioned what they had accepted as normal, what they had allowed through silence, and what responsibility they carried simply by watching. They learned that authority built on fear is never permanent, that dignity can survive even the harshest humiliation, and that injustice, no matter how strong it seems, can be confronted in ways no one expects. This story leaves a lasting message. True power does not come from domination, but from integrity. Cruelty may rule for a time, but it always reveals its weakness. Quiet strength can outlast loud oppression. And when injustice reaches its peak, the world has a way, seen or unseen, of restoring balance. It is a reminder that the helpless are never truly alone, that silence can be broken, and that even in the darkest moments, hope can arrive from the most unexpected place.